Joaquin, a paraplegic computer engineer living alone in his large, old house filled with memories of his deceased wife and daughter, has only his elderly dog, Casimiro, for company. After learning from the vet that there is no hope for Casimiro, Joaquin searches online for painless euthanasia methods, buys the necessary narcotic, and prepares biscuits for the occasion. One day, Berta and her mute daughter Betty arrive unannounced to inquire about a room for rent. Joaquin is irritated but needs the money due to impending foreclosure. Although he is antisocial and dislikes Berta's attempts to engage with him, she persists, sharing her story of moving to the city to pursue a dancing career. When she asks why he won't sell the house to pay off his debts, Joaquin remains silent, revealing the house's emotional significance. Berta's loud music and Betty's hiding habits annoy him, yet they gradually become a part of his life. Betty befriends Casimiro, who stops growling and allows her to hug him, moving Joaquin to tears, which he holds back until he's alone. Joaquin spends time in the basement with computers and hears strange noises from the neighbor's house. Using a stethoscope, he discovers men monitoring him, aware of his wheelchair. They plan to return later, prompting Joaquin to record their conversation while he has dinner with the girls. The next morning, he reviews the recording, noting names but unclear about their activities, only hearing them move wood. Seeking more information, he drills a small hole in the wall for a camera linked to his computer, hiding it with an old PC cabinet. He tries to send Berta and Betty away for their safety, but Berta, upset about their contract, accuses him of fear and gives him until morning to decide. The next day, Joaquin allows them to stay. In the basement, he watches the recording, noting the men work at night, digging a hole due by Christmas Eve, and discussing explosives. The biggest shock is seeing Berta arrive as well. She navigated the rooftops to avoid detection, knowing the men well and being involved with their leader, Gallarito. She rented a room to monitor him, but he scolded her for crossing over, warning of the risks. After giving her a special key, he instructed her to only text him. Later, Betty sneaked into Joaquin's room in her underwear to watch him sleep briefly before leaving. Joaquin, reviewing recordings, realized the men were digging a tunnel to rob the nearby bank. While Berta was at the market, Joaquin tried to connect with Betty over her drawings, but she dismissed him. He discovered she was in contact with Casimiro and discreetly hid a microphone. Joaquin learned the men planned to transport the stolen money on a wheeled cart through the tunnel. Gallarito found out one of his men, Munico, had been texting inside the house and sent the bank's address, infuriating him. As a thug searched for Munico, Gallarito scolded Zerto for including him. Munico was dragged to the basement, punched, and tied to a table, crying that he only wanted to see a girl during his break. Gallarito, unsatisfied, berated him for risking the operation, then stabbed him with a screwdriver and hit him with a hammer. Joaquin debates calling the police while watching everything on his phone but hesitates. Canario, Gallarito's brother, contemplates what to do with the body, and Gallarito assures him that their corrupt officer will handle it. Later, Joaquin removes the microphone from Casimiro's collar, slips a sedative into Berta's wine, and ties her to his bed. He takes her phone and sets an alarm for her next sedation. While watching recordings, he learns the thieves have been warned by their cop contact to avoid safes 747 and 748, which belong to important dealers. A woman named Renee arrives with explosives for the bank heist, replacing Munico. When Berta wakes, Joaquin questions her about her boyfriend, but she defends him. This isn't ideal since fireworks in Argentina are typically set off on the night of the 24th, but hopefully, people will be too busy celebrating to notice. The real issue for Joaquin is that they replaced the little cart with a cat carrier, which is larger and sturdier. If it tips over, nothing will fall out, meaning he can't steal from it as it passes since it doesn't have an open top like the cart. With no other option, Joaquin alters his plans. He finishes creating the hole in the floor and covers the lid he made with dirt to conceal it properly. He also inspects the pipe, taking measurements to ensure water is still flowing through it. However, when he attempts to return, he spots Gallarito and Canario coming down the tunnel, prompting him to quickly hide in the abandoned area while overhearing them discuss a safe house known only to them and Zerto. Canario is unhappy that Zerto is aware of it too, as he doesn't trust him, especially after the incident with Munico. Once the two men leave, Joaquin heads back to the house just in time to sedate Berta again, but Betty is missing. After finding Casimiro alone, Joaquin realizes what has happened. Betty has gone down the hole. He checks the camera and confirms his suspicion. She is in the other house, snooping around. At that moment, the men return to the basement, but fortunately, Betty knows she needs to hide. As Zerto searches for his watch, which he believes he left behind but can't locate, another person arrives. Gutman, the corrupt cop aiding their operation. He provides a list of safes to avoid due to their connection to alarms and promises to send police cars to patrol outside that neighborhood. In return, Galarito must retrieve papers from safe 155, which someone is using to blackmail Gutman. After they depart, Betty rushes back into the house, and Joaquin helps her climb back up, discovering she took Zerto's watch. Joaquin then notices Galarito is calling Berta instead of texting, needing her to answer to avoid suspicion. Since she still refuses to cooperate, Joaquin brings his computer again and points out that Betty stopped talking 2 years ago, coinciding with her meeting Galarito. He plays a recording from Casimiro's collar, where Betty reveals how Galarito secretly touched her. Joaquin shares his plan to sabotage Galarito's operation by flooding his tunnel, and Berta, deeply upset about her daughter, finally agrees to help. When the phone rings again, she answers and tells Galarito that everything is fine and Joaquin rarely goes to the basement these days. After hanging up, Joaquin sedates her once more. On Christmas Eve, Joaquin and Betty watch fireworks while the thieves set up the explosives. They plan to take a break and enter at 8 a.m. So Joaquin locks Betty in her room and uses the break to go down and move the explosives onto the water pipe. He then reaches the end of the tunnel, opens a hole leading to the bank, picks the lock of one of the forbidden safes, 748, and takes some money in a bag before leaving, unaware that he hasn't fully closed the safe. On his return, he spots Renee examining the tunnel. He believes he can hide as he did previously, but the fan that will clear the tunnel air is about to be activated, so he must hurry back into the bank to avoid asphyxiation. Fortunately for Joaquin, their preparations take long enough for him to return home before they notice. They detonate the explosive, causing water to leak from the pipe, but they misinterpret the hole Joaquin dug as the explosion's result. Renee enters the bank with Galarito's workers, Peachy and Schwarzenegger, and they quickly start emptying the safes based on Gutman's instructions. They find that safe 748 has already been opened, but they can't dwell on it as they realize water is filling the tunnel. Galarito, Canario, and Zerto notice this too, but instead of assisting, they grab the money and flee. Peachy and Schwarzenegger attempt to escape as well, but the tunnel is half full, so they return to the bank and open a connected safe to trigger the alarm, hoping the police will rescue them before they drown. However, Renee, who tried to cross the tunnel upon seeing the water, gets stuck in the middle. Hearing her cries, Joaquin opens the hole to help, but when she sees him, she screams and warns the others about him while trying to pull him down. Joaquin then releases her and closes the hole again, leaving her to drown. The pipe breaks completely, and soon water floods the bank and Joaquin's basement. He removes the hole lid and cleans the dirt to avoid suspicion, then pulls a rope he had set up earlier to topple old computer cabinets over it as he exits the basement with his bag of money. As the power goes out in the entire block, he checks on Berta, who attacks him and pins him to the bed, demanding to know why he didn't trust her. Joaquin kisses her and tells her he has the money, so they can escape together, but Berta refuses. She grabs a syringe to sedate him, leaving Joaquin no choice but to hit her to knock her out. After injecting her with a sedative, he cleans the dirt off his body and steps outside to speak with the police, pretending to be a concerned neighbor worried about the water in his basement, and is told to wait inside. Gutman is nearby overseeing everything and calls Galarito to find out what happened, but he is confused as well. Gutman hangs up when he learns they couldn't retrieve his papers. Moments later, Gutman takes a group of officers to search Joaquin's house, and he lets them in, still acting like an innocent citizen wanting the system to address the flood damage. He had already let Betty out and made her stay with Berta in his room to pretend they are his wife and daughter. The basement floor has collapsed, so the cops can't find the hole he dug, and they conclude there's nothing unusual in his house. Galarito continues trying to call Berta's phone, which is in Joaquin's hand and goes unanswered, but as Gutman is leaving, he takes the phone, thinking it's Joaquin's, saves his number, and asks him to call if he remembers anything that could assist the investigation. A short while later, Galarito, along with Zerto and Canario, arrives at the house, posing as police officers. To avoid suspicion, Joaquin lets them in while texting Gutman to come over. Simultaneously, Gutman calls Galarito, furious about the opening of safe 748, but Galarito dismisses him and turns to interrogate Joaquin. Joaquin claims he only knows that his basement flooded when thieves attempted to rob the bank and mentions he lives alone since the woman renting his room left yesterday. Just then, Betty emerges from the room, ruining his alibi. Galarito draws his gun, checks on the still sedated Berta, and grabs Betty to question Joaquin again. Joaquin continues to feign innocence, fabricating lies that contradict each other, prompting Galarito to shove him off his chair onto the floor. Canario begins to beat and kick him, trying to force a confession, but they are interrupted when Berta's phone rings. Galarito answers it, only to find Gutman on the line, mistakenly believing he's speaking to Joaquin and saying he's at the door. Panicking at this twist, Galarito lets Gutman in and demands to know how he got Berta's number while Canario ties Joaquin up. Gutman is equally confused, leading Galarito to prepare to shoot Joaquin, which finally prompts him to speak. However, what he says is yet another lie, but this time more convincing. He asks Zurdo for help, pretending to know him. Drawing on the information he gathered while spying, he tells Galarito that Zurdo would come to his house via the rooftops to subdue and sedate Berta. He informed Joaquin about the robbery and instructed him to dig a hole in the floor to retrieve some money, which they would later split among the three of them. Zurdo accuses him of lying, prompting Joaquin to reference the safe house known only to Galarito, Zurdo, and Canario. He then directs them to a nearby cupboard, where they discover Zurdo's watch, which Joaquin claims he left behind. Cornered, Zurdo shoots Canario, who returns fire, resulting in both of their deaths simultaneously. As Galarito mourns his brother, Berta awakens, seizes a dropped gun, and kills Galarito for his actions against her daughter. Gutman frees himself from the weak rope binding him and offers assistance. He places the bodies in his car's trunk and advises Joaquin on how to clean the blood from the floor before demanding the stolen money. Joaquin refuses, revealing he has a recording of Gutman collaborating with the thieves, which could implicate him. Gutman laughs, grabs Casimiro's biscuits from the jar, mistaking them for regular cookies, and threatens Berta with his gun. Joaquin reluctantly allows him to leave with the money. As Gutman drives away, the effects of Casimiro's narcotics hit him, causing dizziness that leads to a crash and a fire. He decides to lie on the ground, waiting for death or the police. Days later, Joaquin's house is cleaned and emptied, and he prepares to leave it behind to start anew with Berta, Betty, and Casimiro.